Hello everyone, my name's Mark Grave. I'm Chief Executive Officer of the Australian Wool Exchange. I'd like to thank Rita firstly for inviting me to speak today and give a presentation to you, a higher level presentation of the Australian wool market in 2021. And as we'll see, 2021 in isolation is probably a little bit hard to gauge where it exactly fits with the market over previous years. But certainly what's impacted us severely have been seasons, but also the impact of COVID, and that will become clear as we go through the presentation. I hope today is successful for you. I hope the conference is successful, and I wish you and ASI all the greatest success in 2022. It's got to be better than previous years. Look, the common place we start in Australia when we talk about the market is the Australian Eastern Market Indicator. And we have here on the top, we have the indicator in the Australian dollars, AUD, and in US dollars underneath. What I'm trying to reflect here is that it's been quite a consistent year. So we might have started back in January 21 at a level in Australian terms of about 1,150 cents per kilogram, and we've ended up somewhere close to 1,360 or 70 cents a kilogram. But we've had our dips and troughs along the way. But overall, it's actually been quite a consistent year. Now, this has been an issue, and in spite of the fact that we might have supply chain issues, we might have worker shortages with shearers, but overall, we've been able to maintain a consistent market over that period and consistent volumes, roughly in the range of 35 to 38,000 bales on average per week being offered for sale. I might add that over the last 12 months, the issue about worker shortages is starting to play on the industry, but we're hoping that over the next 12 months or so, as we come out of the COVID bubbles and COVID issues that we've been addressing, that we might be able to overcome those. Now, if you looked at this year in isolation, you'd think overall it's been a solid year. They're fairly consistent and good numbers. But as I said earlier, it should never be taken in isolation. This is on the back of previous years which have either underperformed or been subject to the changes in weather and seasonal conditions that we have, and also changes in the volume of wool that's able to be offered. If you look at this market that you're looking at here was taken, this is one day at our National Market Reporting Service. So the volume you're looking at and even the exchange rates, etc., are up to date. They literally have been produced on the 13th of January, as you can see up here. But then this chart here, if you look over the last 2 years, so we go back to January in 2020, and we're now here in 2022, you can see how we came off a trough, a really good performing, strong market, late December 2019 and early 2020. And then it fell. We had a trough, and this is actually the start of where COVID started to impact on the markets, and we would have seen this reflected around the world. Not only just in wool markets, but we saw this in terms of exchange rates, where money might have been safer. There were international issues dealing between the trade with China, but the market certainly did fall substantially in that first 6 to 9 months, and we saw that reflected very clearly. And after about September 2020, the market has started to realise that it hit a floor and actually started to improve in its performance. And over the next 18 months, 15 to 18 months, as you can see and you saw from the previous slide, the market has actually been quite strong and consistent. And I think that's the key, is that we like to see strong but consistent markets without that level of volatility that we can see from time to time. As you can see from the header up here, on this particular day, which was on Thursday, there was $10 million of wool sold, that's Australian dollars, of wool sold on the Thursday. And this is a very good indicator of how the growers, how the farmers and ranchers actually feel about the market on the day. That's their sentiment. If they're only passing in 5% of wool, that means they're prepared to accept the price and therefore the market is meeting their needs and they are meeting the market's needs. Now, without going into too much analysis on this, there are markets within markets, and I'll show this more clearly in the next slide. But there certainly are types of wool that are being favoured, and those that are very important to the exporting and trading market that are being sought very keenly. So there's strong competition on particular types of wool, particular credentialed wool, those that have certain style and micron parameters. But also we know that in the stronger wool, the crossbred wool, that's been underperforming and has been doing so for quite a long time. It's one of the laments of the industry, and this has been, as I say, around for the last 4, 5, 6 years, where we would like to see the crossbred market stronger, but we also know conversely that the meat markets have been very strong. So it's not all bad news. It's, yes, the wool market needs to be better in that crossbred section, what we call crossbred, which is really 24 or 5 micron and stronger. But certainly the counter to that is that the meat markets have been doing exceptionally well. This is a slide, we don't show it all that often, but it's really reflective of 4 years in a row of the values for adult fleece. This is all fleece wool, all different microns, for merino and crossbred wool, reflecting how much return there is per bale, the average value per bale of wool sold for each particular micron. So what we can see here, if I look at the extreme left, if you're looking here in December 2021, the average bale of wool at the 16 micron, which is down on this level here, was being sold at $3,692. So let's call it $3,700 Australian dollars per bale for adult fleece. And that's directly comparable to other years, such as this is 2018, the orange line is 2019, and the green line is 2020. So you can start to compare wool type by micron, adult fleece, sound wool, so it's not tender, but you're starting to get a reflection on how that wool performs year in, year out, and this is over the last 4 years. So in this period, we've had drought, we've had exceptionally good seasons, we've had the introduction of COVID over this year and the previous year. So this is just for the month of December. And I think the important part here is that most wool growers in Australia tend to sell the same wool at the same time. If they've sold in December last year, there will be a vast majority that will continue to sell their wool in the following at the same time in the following year. So you're starting to see a real trend here on what's actually happening in the market itself by half micron group. Now in the center here I've put a red line, and really this is to separate what we would generally regard as merino wool versus what we would generally in Australia regard as crossbred wool. So 23.5, and even that's a bit fine for crossbred. But once you start getting 25 micron and stronger, up to 32, we don't have a lot of wool, a lot stronger than 32 micron. You can see how quickly the average bale, the average value per bale of crossbred wool drops off compared to the merino. There's a real cliff where it just drops off the edge almost. But as I said, that's countered by the fact that the merino markets, the meat markets have been strong over those same periods for the crossbred wool, whereas the merino is actually obviously more centered towards value in the wool rather than the carcass. But this is what our growers in Australia are really weighing up, where their enterprise is now, what type of ranch or farmer they're going to run in years to come. And these are really hard decisions that are being placed in front of our growers each year. And as I said, it really starts around about this level here, about 22 micron, that you start to see the market taper off very strongly. In years gone by, Australian wool was built on what we call 21 micron wool. That was the average type of wool, the average, that was where the volume of wool was. Now everything has shifted more towards the finer edge. So it's certainly under 20 micron, more likely to be 19 micron and finer. And we know that sheep that are of 19 micron and finer, you generally have to run more of them to create the same volume of wool, but we know that the value of that wool is significantly higher. So these are the balancing questions that we're starting to see, and that trend seems to will seem to continue. It's been important because in this area here, which is the 16 to 18 micron, which is what we would regard as superfine, if I went 4 years previous to this, you would see that they had underperformed. There were growers who were passionate about what they did, but weren't able to really make meaningful money out of that area because the markets just weren't strong. And as we know, markets ebb and flow. The market itself for merino wool, look, it's been very selective. It is the finer wool, as I've said. And what we're finding now is that buyers in particular, their exporters and processor partners are looking for well-tested wool that's coming up strong in the length and strength measurements. It's finer. It, in our case, is usually a non-mules type or declared wool, and also that if possible, a well-credentialed wool, so something that's linked to a sustainability scheme. We know that all farmers and ranchers do the best that they can with their wool clip, and they look after their animals. But increasingly, what we're finding is and I'm sure you've heard this before, that the exporters and processors, the retailers, are looking for evidence. They're looking for proof that the rancher is doing as much as they can to contribute to the health and well-being of their animals, of their land, and of course that's where the sustainability schemes fit in. We know that the same exists also for crossbred wool. It's just that the crossbred market has just been a very slow, diminishing market over the last few years. We'd like to think it's hit its base, and that the only way from here is up. But certainly it's not devoid of those same issues about sustainability, mulesing if there's an issue, the way that we look after them and the workers. And so sustainability is now one of the business decisions that our exporters and processors are having to consider when they're purchasing wool. I said earlier on about how we've had consistent volumes, and we have in terms of the wool being offered for sale and being sold. We've just recently had a wool production forecast meeting, and the expectation is that next year, 21-22, we'll end up with 318 million kilograms of wool. Now, in the last 3 years, that's probably an increase of 10 to 12%. Of greasy wool that's being grown here in Australia, being produced. It's certainly a long way off the highs back in the 20 plus years ago when we were close to 1,000 million kilograms, and in fact we were over. But this seems to be about the right level. It's not necessarily based on more sheep. Wool growers here in Australia are looking to retain as many surplus sheep as they can. That's part of their planning cycles that they go through, and they're looking 3 to 5 years ahead. But it is being built on the fact that we've had extremely good seasons in the last 12 months. Good rains generally right across Australia. In fact, more recently it's been to the case of flooding rains. We're a contrasting country, I'm afraid. Whereas 12 to 18 months ago we were talking severe drought, one in 100-year droughts. So we actually go through this cycle quite regularly, but I'm pleased to say that our volumes and for wool are increasing because our seasons are much better, which means hopefully that it's better all round for all wool growers here in Australia. I did mention before about the influence of COVID. For us, it started in February last year's, in 2020, not last year, the year before. And our role in all of this is to do the best we can to ensure that trade continues. I don't know if this was the case over in the US, but certainly for us, there were calls whether we should suspend sales, whether we should have a different approach, should it be traded electronically. But whichever way, we wanted to make sure that trade could continue. And the key to trade continuing is logistics. As some exporters put it to us very clearly, if we can't move wool, we can't buy it. And that's not just road and train transport, but that's also shipping. And I'm sure that you're aware of some of the shipping issues that we've all had over the last 6 to 18 months, to be honest. There's increases in the cost of shipping. The logistics supply chain now is becoming quite congested, and that's impacted on deliveries from Australia to processors, and not just in wool, but in all manner of goods, and even in terms of the available container space or ship space, so that the vessel space, so that we can actually get wool out of the country. We've been successful in managing to keep all wool sales going. We've put in safe protocols for COVID. We have reporting mechanisms. We've been working with governments to try and ensure that we can maintain the markets, and that's been a great success. We know that growers have been keen to ensure that markets continue, and certainly buyers and processors who have machinery that they need to keep working have been keen for the trade to continue. I'm proud of the fact that the Australian industry has worked together. Doesn't always happen, but it has on this occasion. Worked together for the same reasons. We've put them in difficult circumstances for trading, but they have been very diligent, very cooperative, and to a person, they've all abided by the conditions we've been working with. The overriding issue at the moment still is with supply chains. So whilst there might be shipping congestion, say in Singapore or other destinations, there are other destinations that are limited capacity to take deliveries. It's important that we try and maintain the ability to trade, but also the flexibility that's required in such difficult circumstances. My two final points. I did touch on earlier on about our issues with workforce. With COVID and border restrictions, and in Australia, you've got to understand, we not only had national border, we are an island nation, we also had state borders, and in one particular state, we had a border within a border. So we've been dealing with very difficult workplace situations, how we get staff shortages, how we overcome that, how we recruit staff. And a number of our shearers and wool handlers in wool sheds came from New Zealand or the islands, and they weren't able to stay, or they didn't stay, they went home and weren't able to come back to Australia to work. So we've been facing shearer shortages now for some time. And we see this as a high priority for the industry to overcome, because for all the right reasons and even the welfare of the sheep, we need to be able to remove the wool from the sheep. They need to be shorn. These are some of the challenges we as an industry are facing, and together we will try and with government help and support, we will try and overcome that. I'm hoping and I expect that your situation may be different. And I hope so, because trying to find shearers and skilled people in this area is not that easy. So they can't be just trained in a moment's notice. Planning is required. Finally, a lot of what we've been talking about here and what I've been saying relates to traceability. Traceability has been on the radar of the industry for a long, long time. It's essential for supply chains and logistics purposes. It's essential for supply chain credentialed systems sustainability platforms, integrity platforms, and that is only going to continue to develop. There's certainly been a strong push here, and we've been working at it now for some, dare I say it, 20 plus years, but there's been a strong push here for an increase in the level of traceability, not just for logistic purposes, but also for exotic animal disease purpose. And that, I think, is something that you'll continue to see over the coming months, and hopefully before the end of the calendar year. I say that half tongue-in-cheek, knowing that we've been involved in this space for the last 20 plus years. But there's certainly more urgency about that now, and more willingness, because I think people companies in particular, are starting to realise that there is benefit and efficiencies that can be gained, and hopefully for markets to come, better information makes better business decisions. If you have the information available or are able to trace the information, hopefully those business decisions are able to be made quickly, or the information is able to be provided quickly. There's all manner of types. We've been working on RFID for some time now in wool bales, in wool packs, and we think that that will come to fruition over the coming 12 months. So I'd say watch this space. That impacts all people, large and small, all countries, large and small, all farms, ranches, large and small, because the requirements and the benefits, I think, are really untapped at this stage, but I would expect and hope that there is a lot that can be gained from doing this. That's my summary. I hope you found that of interest. Certainly it was higher level. There's a lot more detail that we could go into, but for the purpose of giving you an outline of how the market has performed here in Australia, and hopefully you've seen something similar. We hope this has been I hope it's been of value to you. And through ASI, again, thank you very much for the opportunity. And if there's any information required, we've had a great working relationship with ASI. We value it and your team very, very highly. And if there's an opportunity to speak to you or help you, assist you, please just reach out. I wish you all the best, and thank you for the opportunity. Goodbye.